back to the Shuffle Squad. Zach Lesage here. We're going to be covering over the top 10 best decks. Now, I took these top 10 best decks after the Lille Regional Championships, not Danks or Brisbane, so stay tuned for that next week. In this video, we're going to be covering over the top 10 decks that are kind of shaking up the metagame right now, deck lists included. Yep, not just the decks, you'll get access to the full deck list, and these are decks that I've taken from top players or curated on my own. As a professional player, I hope I have a decent insight into the metagame, and if you think so, give this video a like, share it with your friends, subscribe to the Shuffle Squad, and of course, put your best guesses for the top 10 best decks in the comments below. Of course, in the pinned comment, you can get access to all these deck lists, copy and paste right into TCG Live, and if you need any of the cards for your decks, check out Kayfabe Cards. Let's jump into our number 10 deck. An unfortunate fall from grace has Mega Absolbox at number 10 this week. I think that this deck is truly one of the surprises of the format. And when I say a surprise, I don't mean it's a bad surprise, but I do think that when you have some of the absolute best minds in the game that take a brand new archetype that no one knows about, of course, you're going to see some players that might not know how to play against it. Now that most major YouTubers and everyone else has kind of covered the deck, we're starting to see some flaws here and there. Now, I do like this newer version, presumably from Tord Reckless Metafy, and that's going to be the Mega Absol with Eerie, being able to rip some cards from your opponent's hand. I know that I was testing with my wife, and I was able to Eerie rip 2 items on a 3-card hand, use Claw of Darkness, and rip the other card. So you have some control elements. We also have that Technical Machine de-evolution, so you could rip some rare candies, de-evolve your opponent's Pokemon, play some damage counters around with Monkey Dory. So there's a lot of really cool things going on with this deck. And at the time of recording of this video, we just found out that this deck won the Brisbane Regional Championships. So as much as it's number 10 this week, I think the deck could go up going forward. So might not have been as well positioned, still won a regional championships out in Australia, and we'll have to see how the rest of it goes. It's really one of those decks where there's a lot of different tricks and things going into it. So there's always ways to kind of adapt to the metagame, and we've already seen that cornerstone has been cut from these decks. I'd like to see what other future iterations there are, but I really do like the Mega Absol Claw of Darkness plus Eerie combination with some other disruption based cards. And I mean, a 280 HP basic plus Lively Stadium plus Bravery Charm is a lot for most decks to deal with, especially when some of the top decks in the format are Gardevoir EX. Claiming its way into number 9 is going to be Ceruledge EX. Now, I believe we're still rocking Ross Cawthon's list from Milwaukee. So Ceruledge is kind of falling off the metagame a little bit. It seems like players are favoring Gholdengo and other aggressive decks in the format. Seems pretty standard of what we should expect. I think there's always going to be a bit of a following when it comes to a deck like this. And then there's going to be some players that are like, yeah, no, it doesn't necessarily hit as hard as we want to, or you don't necessarily have all that control throughout the entire game. Of course, with Abyssal Flames, your deck's going to get stronger, or should get stronger as the game progresses, as you get more energies in your discard pile. Decks like Dango are going to be strong throughout the entire game, although you do have to control your energies. And I think the power of control might make it a little bit more powerful. Now, we just saw at Danks Regionals with Dango winning, we might see an uptick on Ceruledge. So similar to Mega Absolbox, just because this deck's number 9 does not mean it's a bad deck in the top 10. I actually have 30 fully built decks in real life in this metagame. And I mean, okay, deck number 30 might be Shen Pao Baxcalibur because it did well at some online events, but decks like 28 area are like some of the mega Pokemon like a Mega Venusaur and Mega Lucario that haven't necessarily had their pop-off moment. As the metagame shifts, so are these numbers, and I think that we're probably dealing with around 20 or so viable decks that you could choose at any given point. I mean, the deck that came second at Danks Regionals is Flareon Box, and that's a deck that's not even on this list. Surprise, surprise, no foreshadowing here. It's probably going to be on the list next week. So as the metagame adjusts, always stay tuned for if your favorite deck is making the metagame. I promise I do look at the metagame quite intensively and go through these lists every single week and rebuild all my decks in real life as well. It's just as much for my enjoyment as it is for your enjoyment. Jolting into its way at number 8 is probably going to be my personal choice of the week. Now, Joltik Box is a deck that I hold near and dear to my heart. My wife and I love playing this deck. I know it's simple. I know some might hate us because it's just another Iron Hands deck, but I do love how you can simply set up Jolting Charge, power up Pokemon, and it's clocking into your shift. You're knocking out Pokemon. It's really good. Now, with you having both grass types of Iron Leafs and Galvantula in the deck, you should be doing pretty good against some of these dark type Pokemon that are trying to counter Gardevoir. I mean, most dark type Pokemon are trying to just counter a deck, so those decks are good, right? Well, this kind of counters the counters, and Iron Hands itself can be scary for a Gardevoir deck if they have a little bit of a slower setup, and then Pikachu can deal with a lot of those big decks like Dango and Ceruledge. There's a handful of others too, and we look at the metagame, and I'm like, you want to know what? Joltik Box is just kind of getting the shade right now. Lily's Clefairy can deal with your Dragapult matchup, Iron Hands at the beginning, Lily's Clefairy or Blood Moon at the end, and Joltik Box is absolutely one of the sleeper picks in our metagame. And I think that we saw it with Diego Casaraga at the regionals that we had in South America a couple weeks ago, and he took the deck to a top cut finish, and we really didn't see too much. Now, I did see at Danks regionals that Joe Bernard of Omnipoke played it, one of the casters, and he had a not so successful day two, but he still made day two. I think that Joltik Box is really one of those decks where, of course, there's going to be players that have a rough day two with this deck. You can't beat everything, and you have linear plays, but it is really one of those decks that I think that not enough people are putting enough focus into, and I put a lot of focus into this deck. This deck was a really close consideration for me at the World Championships. I did play it for the one round of NEIC that I played before I ended up dropping because we had a little bit of a medical emergency, but it's one of those things where I put my money where my mouth is. I've won cups with this deck. I think it's absolutely a fantastic choice right now, and not enough people are giving it credit. Making its way into number 7 is going to be Marnie's Grimmsnarl EX. Now, this is one of those decks where I'm like, as I'm looking at it, maybe 7's a little bit low on this list, but I do think that we have some absolute banger decks in our top 5 or 6 decks right now. Now, Marnie's Grimmsnarl to me is definitely a direct answer to Gardevoir EX. And honestly, I think it's not as direct of an answer as most people think it is. Gardevoir, I've seen a lot of circumstances, can still overcome this matchup with relative ease, and we're kind of just stuck with a deck that seems like a dark type Dragapult that didn't necessarily get all the way there. Now, I don't want to make it sound like I'm hating on this deck. Marnie's Grimmsnarl is an absolutely fantastic deck, and I like that you have some similarities to Charizard, some similarities to Dragapult, that you take the core of a Froslass Monkey Dory deck, and there's some tips and tricks that you can kind of pull here and there and really see some success. I believe I took Karen Ferris' list from Lille Regionals, and I think that Marnie's Grimmsnarl is just one of those decks that's just like, it's downright good in our metagame. There's nothing that's really wrong with it. It can always shift around depending on how the metagame goes, but there's some matchups you just do not want to see. And I think those matchups are like Gholdengo, and there's other matchups too that if players know what they're doing, it can be absolutely devastating. So Marnie's Grimmsnarl, we've seen some players have some absolute success with it. We'll have to see how the deck continues to go. But in terms of lists, most lists are looking incredibly similar to this kind of build. And I think we'll see as some players experiment with it more, maybe this deck will end its way back on top of the metagame. But I don't think we've seen that big win, and I don't necessarily know if it's super capable of that big win, at least at a master setting. Globally, I'd want to see it. Let me know if there is, but I don't think we've seen that massive huge win from Grimmsnarl the same way that we've seen it from Dragapult decks, Gholdengo decks, or Gardevoir decks, and those are the decks that are really kind of crushing it right now. Burning its way into number 6 is going to be Charizard EX. Now, Charizard EX is one of those interesting decks because I think it's very good, and it kind of falls out of place out of the metagame for some reason or another. Now, it might be because the deck is slipping into the top 5, might be because the players that are playing it just aren't as dedicated as players like Jackson Ford, but for similar reasons, I think to Marnie's Grimmsnarl, Charizard just ends up finding its way out of the metagame because it does its job at countering the metagame. Gardevoir is like, okay, cool, we're going to take a week off of being successful. I think we saw a lot of regionals without Gardevoir being as successful as it previously was. And then Gardevoir is probably going to strike back. So if we're looking at the timeline, I think we're going to see Gardevoir probably have a lot of success at Las Vegas regionals and maybe Buenos Aires. It's really one of those things where at number 6 for Charizard, you got to dodge a lot of Dragapult Dusknoir decks, and that's going to be a tough matchup. So Charizard is well positioned in the metagame. It's just you don't really want to run into one of the more popular decks now, and that popular deck is replace the popular deck that you're going to try to counter a little bit. I did have the Ho-Oh in there. I saw that some other players like Gabriel Smart have included the Ho-Oh over the Chi-Yu, and I like that it's a little bit more stable than Chi-Yu. I also like that there's the prize pack stamp, don't sue me. So it's one of those things where I like how the list plays out. I'm probably going to be updating my Charizard list. There was a player, I'm gapping their name right now. You can feel free to let me know in the comments. They made top 8 at both Lil and Dansk regionals. So once those are all up on Limitless, I'm going to be updating all of my decks. And if you're ever trying to get access to where the other decks that don't fall in the top 10, I do post those in my deck list option on Metafy. So it's just always in my Discord server. I update it pretty frequently. Some decks don't update, right? But it's always one of those things where I'm always tinkering with a few cards, and I'm always reorganizing and ranking those decks. I also have them built in real life, so it might be worthwhile. Shameless plug, I know, but if you're ever looking for that, it does help support my content. Let's see what we got going on at number 5. We're halfway through the list. Hit that like, share, subscribe, and if you haven't already, put the comments in. Help boost the YouTube algorithm, y'all. At number 5, we have Gholdengo EX. Now, I've included the Mega Lucario EX version, and I think that it's one of those things where Mega Lucario X is a good answer to things like Cornerstone, because it doesn't have an ability. Otherwise, this deck just like your opponent puts out a Cornerstone, and you're like, cool, peace out, I'm gonna get lunch break, right? Now, we've seen some other versions of this deck at regionals where players have no counter. They're like, cool, if we hit Cornerstone, we hit it, and if they dodge it, then it's the better call. We've seen versions where players like Gabriel Smart just play Mega Mawile EX, no Turbo Energizer, nothing, and they can just manually build it up, and that gives you some answers against some matchups. It gives you some answers because it's not an ability. And then we see the Mega Lucario. So I went with Mega Lucario this one, but it is definitely a tech option that I don't know if you always need. In terms of this deck, it's taking the build of Gholdengo EX, and we are ripping into our opponent with either our Soul Rock, with Lucario, or we're just trying to make it rain. We have the new Lunatone combo where you could pitch a bunch of energies and then draw, get them all back. And I think that this version of the deck is pretty cool. I like the Cypher Maniacs code breaking in this deck. I like the double Professor Turo. I like the Premium Power Pro plus Vitality Band. So I think in terms of a build, there's a lot of really good things going on here. I do think that the Lucario is not 100% necessary all the time, and it's, again, a metagame call. So that could just go to other consistency pieces, because you also need to run an Ultra Ball there. So we could see an extra Fighting Gong. We could see some other tech cards that go into this deck. We could see a different ace spec that goes into this deck. So I think Dango's really kind of up there in the air. If you're looking to learn more about this deck, I think following some of the top players in the game who've been playing it, this deck was one of the most represented decks at the Dansk Regional Championships, and I think a lot of people are going to be playing this deck for the Las Vegas and Buenos Aires Regional Championships as well. And number 4, we're going to be putting Jellicent Gardevoir EX, or Jelligardy, into the mix. Now, this is one of those decks where I feel like players have not been playing it as much. So I think it's one of those things where it's probably going to start sliding down the ladder of this list. I mean, I think it might actually be in danger of falling out of favor in the metagame to just regular Gardevoir. And right now we have it where the Oceanic Curse is great to stop your opponent from playing Pokemon Tool cards, great for stopping your opponent from item cards, and we've seen some strong players take this in similar metagames to what we're expecting. So maybe after all this, I'm gonna be like, yep, you wanna know what I thought about it? It popped back up. In terms of it, we're a Gardevoir deck. We have options to use Frillish the same way that other decks would use Badoo, and we could just sit there and use Oceanic Curse and shut off some pieces of the metagame. Now, Gardevoir is one of those decks where we see versions that play Iron Bundle, we see versions that play Jellicent, we see versions that play Mega Gardevoir EX, we see versions that play Drifloon and Amorous. There's a bajillion ways to play this deck, and I think really it's a select few that understand how this deck really should be placed in the metagame. Henry Chow, Michael Davidson, Rowan Stave now, etc., etc. Like, there's a handful of those strong players, and I think it's one of those things where I'm just kind of like, yeah, you want to know what I think this is where it should be positioned? They're like, yeah, we know exactly how it's positioned in the metagame. And as I was saying, Gardevoir might not always be the best position deck in the metagame because Enzoric is kind of coming on its way back up. We see Marnie's Grimmsnarl still out there. We see Charizard deck still out there. And we see that Mega Absolbox deck out there. So when there's a handful of decks in the top 10 that are all dark type, it's probably a little bit harder for Gardevoir to absolutely dominate. So stay tuned to see where Jelly ends up being placed in the metagame. And we'll see how that goes next week. At number 3, we have Enzoric EX. Now we're going to go with the Piper Lapine list. And it's one of those things where she replaced the Toadscrew line with Enzdarmanitan. And I think one thing that I've adjusted in this deck is I cut a card for an Enzreshiram here because she only played 1 copy. I think I like playing 2 copies of that card. Now, something like Psyduck might not necessarily be necessary, but I do like that she did kind of predict that Dragapult Dusknoir was going to be incredibly powerful and dominate the Lille Regional Championships. So having the Psyduck with the ability that blocks Curse Blast, pretty strong. Now, Enzoric, trade, drawing a bunch of cards, pitching a card from your hand, drawing 2 with its ability, and then copying either the Enzdarmanitan, Enzdarmaka, Enzreshiram, or Enzra from your bench. Reasonably, we're copying Enzdarmanitan or Enzreshiram. There's also other Pokemon like Okidoki EX that I'm still searching for a prize pack stamp version, by the way. So if you're ever a fan, you're like, hey, you want to know how you could really make it up to me? I really need a stamped Okidoki EX. Hit me up if you're going to be at Buenos Aires or LEIC. Shameless plug again. And there's other things that you could be doing with this deck. Like there's Monkey Dory. Like you could stop your opponent's Dragapult deck from basically putting damage counters on your Pokemon because you're able to go Dark Energy switch, move it all back, 6 damage counters, and really control how the game wants to go. It's a bit of a technical deck, and I think that's one of the things that holds a lot of players off from playing it. But as we saw in recent times, we've seen the Fernandez brothers really take this deck with their own turn. Cal Connor played this deck to a top cut finish at Danks, and Piper herself played it at Danks Regionals. So there's a lot of Enzoric EX believers. We're gonna have to see how the rest of the deck kind of plays out, but definitely keep this one on your radar because I think we're gonna see a little bit more of it in the future. At number 2, we have Gardevoir EX. So Gardevoir EX, we're going to be playing the version that a lot of top players have been playing with the Mega Gardevoir EX. Now, Mega Gardevoir EX is a 1 of tech, and it allows you to knock out some Pokemon that maybe you couldn't otherwise got there with. Also being able to play Drifloon, also being able to play some text. I actually like this version a little bit more. It's a little bit more aggressive than the other version of Jellicent Gardevoir, which is great when you have a lot of Pokemon with large HPs, such as Mega Absol EX, even knocking out something like Enzoric EX that wouldn't always be possible. And with that massive HP, a Monkey Dory being able to move some damage with a Adrenaline Brand, we're finally seeing Mega Gardevoir have a home. It's not the 3 of copy that we maybe imagined to be playing this big Mega Gardevoir deck, but having it as a tech is great because Psychic Embrace is such an engine of the deck itself, and you have all these other powerful attackers that are not worth 3 prize cards. I think that we're going to see a few more versions of this deck kind of pop off in the future because we saw Dragapult Dusknoir have a great success at the Lille Regional Championships. So if that deck kind of gets countered by Gardevoir, it would logically make sense that Gardevoir is in a prime position to see success going forward. Now at Danks and Brisbane, it didn't necessarily see the success across the board that we were expecting. So I really think we're going to see that success at Las Vegas and or the Buenos Aires special event. So stay tuned for that, but I think Gardevoir's still on top, but it's not our number 1 deck of the week. And maybe I mentioned the deck a few times in this video, but our number 1 deck of the week is Dragapult Dusknoir takes our top spot of the week. Now, it's a deck that kind of sat there in the top 5 for a little bit, and it was like, okay, we're good. We got Lily's Determination. We're a little bit better. And I think it was really waiting for the moment for players to either play Psyduck and Golduck or not. And we've seen it in a few decks, but I think there was only the 2 decks, the Enzoric deck and the Mega Absol deck that both played it. And there's ways around it, right? Like you could always place your damage counters first with Dragapult, then hit with a Hlucha, do that all at once, and really force your opponent to find that card again. I went with Alberto Conti's version of the deck. I did like the Brock's Scouting in the deck over the Nest Ball, giving yourself more out to just being able to search for your Pokemon or your evolutions throughout the game. Now, the deck's going to play remotely the same as it always has been. You're Phantom Diving, using a bunch of Recon directives, Dusknoir, Dusclops, popping whatever you need, and Bidoo at the beginning of the game is like Joltik box. You're clocking in for that 9 to 5. You're like itchy pollen. Hopefully my opponent has nothing. Itchy pollen. You're ready to really rumble there. Lily's Determination, since you're not really drawing prize cards aggressively, you're able to always shuffle, draw 8 to get all the cards you need, including that elusive Neo Upper Energy. But you can also handpick that out of your deck with Hilda. I think that this deck is just strategic enough that it's always going to be relevant in the metagame, and it seems like a lot of top players pick the side of Dragapult or Gardevoir, rarely both, but it's one of those things where we see top players playing this deck, and it does well when they play it. So if you're looking for a strong deck for Vegas, this deck continues to be one of the strongest choices. But any of the decks on this list, including a lot of the decks in the top 20, again, check out my Metafile link to gain access to all those if you want to support me. Those decks are always great too, and I often play them at League Cups, League Challenges, even at regionals. The last regionals I played Cressel, and that was a pretty good call too. But that's what we got going on for our top 10 decks. Let me close things out. And that's what we got going on for our video today. I hope you've really enjoyed watching and learning more about the metagame. I love making these types of videos. Sometimes I procrastinate a little bit because I always get into my own head, but I really do think it kind of helps me as a player understand where the metagame's heading. And I hope it helps you as you kind of go through your week, understanding which decks may be on the rise, which decks might be on the decline. And of course, if you ever need any help, hit me up for some coaching at metafy.gg/@Zacklessage. I'd totally love to help you, whether you're going to regionals, League Cups, or if you're just really trying to get into the game. As for me, I'm going to be leaving to Buenos Aires, Argentina in about a week. And I'm going to stay out there, and then I'm also going to be in Sao Paulo, Brazil for the Latin American International Championships. So a lot of really cool tournaments for me coming up, and I'm more than excited to try my absolute best to get some awesome points for my World Championship invites. If you're ever looking for anything to support me, coaching's a great way. Liking, sharing, subscribing this video. If you see it on social media, hit that retweet, that repost button. And of course, you can always check out Element Sleeves. I have some in the back there. If you could see, you can check out elementsleeves.com and use code Lesage. Until next time, I will catch up with all y'all later. Peace out and have a great one. Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. So much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed the content that we have today, and maybe you'll click on one of these other videos, enjoy those videos too. If you haven't already, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and let us know in the comments what video you want to watch next. Until next time, we'll catch up with all y'all later. Have yourself a great day.